Welcome back to the Juiced Up podcast here. Maynard is back, headset and all. He has returned from Fuss. Nard, how was the trip? How are the boys doing?
Trip was good. Boys are doing well. I got to hang out with them for their doubleheader against Grove City. They were rolling in. Think they'd won 3 out of 4. The record's not good, but there was some positive momentum. Got to help out coach first.
Did you
Only
really?
Yeah, I did. Only ran the guys into a couple outs. I mean, I think I told some before the game, you guys are 7-23. Who cares if you get thrown out?
Yeah.
But couple tough base running miscues, but I think everyone got better throughout the game. Couple swipe bags. Um,
It's a good coaching.
hit a little better in game two. Hit a little in game two. And Grove City's a pretty good team. They Odds were against the Barons, and I thought they at least fought better than we would when we were there. If we got down,
Did you get swept?
yeah, they only do 2 game sets now.
What? That's kind of stupid.
Yeah, well, they
How
like
do you win
added
a
it.
series?
They went from 10 to 11 teams in the PAC,
I
and
guess
that
you can
threw
only
everything
speed
in.
them.
Yeah, that threw everything in the shambles. They changed the playoff structure. They changed the scheduling structure. But it was a
Interesting.
doubleheader of 2 9-inning games, that's new for them. They used to
Huh.
be doing like a
That's a
nine
long.
inning
That's a
game and a
long.
7 inning game,
Wait, two nines
which
in one day?
2 9s in one day, and that's the series.
That's a long day.
It's a long day, but yeah, it's a long day for Nard too, who was not used to coaching a full
Yeah. Did you
day.
wear baseball pants and stuff?
I did have to wear baseball pants. I did get a BP pullover out of it.
That's sick.
But yeah, no,
Doing
everyone's.
your collegiate coaching career, eh?
Yeah, I'm 0-2 as an assistant. So I don't know if I'll be welcome back, but it
Do
was
you
good to at
that
least
in your
kind of.
being a collegiate assistant?
What?
Do you see yourself going back to Fuss and being an
Well,
assistant there?
I don't know at Fuss, but we'll see. I mean,
Huh.
the groundwork was laid. I mean, it was good for me to just kind of get my feet back into the practice a little more. I'm trying to get. I mean, your whole life is baseball and training, and I'm just trying to get involved however I can. This was fun to
A
me for
weird
me to.
perspective switch, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, like honestly, I was a lot more relaxed.
Hmm.
And I was joking with a lot because a lot of these guys are former teammates. So it used to be that I was all up in my head talking about how much I suck or how much I hate baseball after
Yeah.
I pop out or something. And now it's kind of like I have the other perspective where I'm like,
Dude, that's actually kind of
who
sick. They
cares?
should make that like a requirement at like a college. Like once you're graduated, you're allowed to come back and coach first.
Yeah, I mean they only have one assistant, so they need all the help they can get. So
Wow.
it was good for me though. It was weird to be back in
That's
Steubenville,
good.
Ohio.
I'll
Um,
be 2 hours from Bryan, so I'm gonna have to make a trip out there.
yeah, you're gonna have to visit, and then we'll run this back with you.
Although I
Um,
won't know anyone at that point. I think everyone's gonna be graduated by this year, so we'll see.
yeah, that's too bad. How are the Brine boys doing though? Are we gonna make our late season
See,
playoff push again?
they're pretty much in the same position that we were in my senior year. Conference tournaments this week, they're the 5 seed, which is what we were. I think we might have been the 6 seed. No, we had to have been the 5 seed. I think we were the 5 seed. So basically, the position that they're in, the way our conference was set up was the people that make it to the championships get an automatic berth to the
Right.
region, which is like I don't know, it's kind of stupid, but it makes sense too because like that means that the championship game's kind of meaningless. But also like if you're like a lower seed, like it's a grind to get there. So they basically have to win 2 or 3 games and to make it to the ship. I think that I mean they've been hot as of late, so we'll see. It really just kind of comes down to
Well, good.
how we perform at a bigger park because we're used to the small parks. That was always our
Yeah.
struggle with the
Yeah,
Kingsport.
you guys are used to the Bryan Small Park and
Yeah, like
300-foot
Kingsport's
fences.
been a minor league stadium, so it's like
Yeah.
our fly ball pop up home runs are now legit pop ups. So
Yeah. Well, good luck to the Lions and the Barons finishing out the year. We'll get into a little more around the baseball world talk at the end, but just wanted to get that off the bat. I'm back. You're going to Alabama. I'm
that's right.
finally staying put for a while, but now you're the one that's moving all over the country.
I know it's crazy. I'm literally recording this in our bedroom right now, and there's no furniture. I'm sitting on our one of our end tables, so we're making it work.
Yeah,
Let's let's
you're gradually losing stuff in the setup, and I'm gradually gaining. I'm trying to add more sports stuff. So and just I got a bunch of bobbleheads. I bought a terrible towel at the Pittsburgh airport, just trying to supplement the Guardians of the
I
Galaxy
saw that.
poster. So Yeah, I mean,
You ever
I
heard of a moving pod before? Have
have I what?
you done a moving pod before?
No, I've not done a moving pod.
Yeah, dude, it was a grind. We had to load that whole, like our whole life up in 2 days. It was pretty
Yeah,
insane.
whenever I'm not looking forward to whenever I have to move out of here and I got to get the couch and the mattress and all that. So you're a little ahead of that, but that's
Okay.
sounds like a joy of 2 days. So
Yeah, and then we get a week off, and then we get to unload in a week. So
did you guys get movers to help you, or were you guys just moving it all yourself?
it's pretty much just me. My dad came to help to move the big stuff, and then Hannah. Hannah was putting in work. Shout out Hannah.
Love to hear it. Good for you guys getting
All
doing
right,
doing it all yourselves.
what do we got?
So we've talked about a variety of pod or topics on the Juiced Up podcast. Haven't really had a whole rhythm. It's been a lot of Grant rants because we've just had scheduling conflicts. So we want to get into a substantive topic. Overall, what does it mean to be a healthy athlete? And there's three aspects that we got here. We got the nutrition aspect. So what are you putting into your body? How are you taking care of yourself? What sorts of habits are you developing to get in the best mindset, get in the best physical and mental condition to play? And then we got an injury prevention and an injury management segment.
Hmm.
The injury prevention, we want to focus on all of the self remedies, the stretching, if there's certain exercises that we do as athletes or you do with athletes to maybe prevent injury or to try and build up sort of kind of avoid some of the overuse injuries, the muscle strains, if there's anything that we can do to be preventing certain injuries. And then the injury management, that once the injury happens, where do you go from there? Are you looking at doctors? Are you looking at physical therapists or chiropractors or the internet? Or kind of what's the mindset
Hmm.
that we go through? And the first reason I want to start, and I want to get into your thoughts first on the nutrition, but where I want to come from is there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of different pro athlete opinions on all of this that'll say like, but if we look at all pro athletes, they all got professional chefs, they got team trainers, they got everything that they need in the MLB and the NFL. D1, you have a lot of it. They have like athlete specific cafeterias, they have them on plans, but you move down the ranks to where we're coming from, you're getting into high school, that you're on your own. That if you want to have a certain health plan, if you want to have a diet plan, you can't just get access to the same caliber of nutrients and food that your pro athletes are. So that's going to be a little bit of a disadvantage. So I want to talk about this in the sense a little bit of how do we make that work.
Sure.
So when I
Before
say
we get into that, I do want to preface by saying I don't necessarily believe in injury prevention. I think
okay,
that just because the nature of sport is so chaotic, I think that's a big facade on a lot of social media posts you'll see talking about like do these injuries to prevent this. Like, well, I think there's exercises that you can do to better prepare the body. Like for example, like your spine, right? Like if you never bend, flex, extend, rotate your spine, and then you go into a deadlift and you blame your bad back on your deadlift, like the exercise of the deadlift is not the issue. The issue is that you've never actually trained your spine, and that's probably more of the injury management, or I guess not the injury management, but more of just like the general training qualities that you're probably kind of talking about there. So I just did want to make that disclaimer, and we can kind of talk more about that as we get into that. But as far as the
yeah,
nutrition,
sure. Yeah, same page. That was kind of where I was going, is like some of those, like you're straining your hamstring running to first base because you haven't run sprinted in 3 months. Like that's something that you can prevent just by being
yeah,
active in a sense. But yeah,
sure.
we'll get into that. We'll get into that discussion since I want to hear more of what you have to say.
Sure. So
Go
as
for
far
it.
as the nutrition, I think so I'm not a nutritionist. I didn't go to school for nutrition, but because I'm in the field of working with athletes, guys will obviously come to me, hey, how can I put on weight? How can I do this? And my immediate thing is I always want to put, and I actually talked about this on one of the podcasts, but I always want to put the initiative on the athlete first, because I think that, especially talking about the high school and college guys, like you want them to kind of find a structure that works for them. Because just as I believe training is a little bit individualized, like nutrition is pretty individualized as well too. For the general individual, most guys aren't going to eat enough, especially being an athlete. Like think about it, you're playing your sport for 3 or 4 hours, then you're doing training sessions, then you're in school for 6 hours a day. So it's like you're probably not eating as frequently and as much as you should. So like I always like to have my guys track for at least 2 weeks before we get into any specific advice. Because I think for them, that's just going to give them like that like not that verbal, but that external feedback of like, this is what I've been doing. Clearly, I'm not eating enough. And then from there, we can kind of plug and chug where we see fit. So like most of the time, guys will come back to me after 2 weeks. And I think for the general high school and college guy, like they do a pretty good job of just getting calories in, because most talking about a male athlete, like most males just generally eat a lot. So I think usually the calories is not a huge thing. There's some minor fixes you can make there, but I do believe that most athletes don't get enough protein. I think that's the biggest insufficiency in a lot of athletes is just not having enough protein. And going back to that idea of you're constantly doing some sort of training, like your body needs protein. So generally, I try to tell guys to get anywhere between 1 to 1.2 times their body weight, in grams of protein. So like I'm 230 pounds. I don't track my food, but I kind of have a general understanding of like I need to get at least 230 grams of protein per day to make myself feel good. And like from just me saying that, that seems like a crap ton of protein. But when you break it down into 4 or 5 meals over time, like that's really only 40 grams, 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. So it's like, it's not like a crazy amount that you have to try to get in, but just tracking that and kind of seeing your progress is going to help you kind of get to that. And then as far as the rest goes, like unless there's like a specific goal that we're trying to achieve, I really don't get too nitpicky about like the other fats, like your macronutrients, like your fats and your carbs and stuff like that. I just kind of tell them to like make sure that the bulk of your food is coming from a protein source and make sure that we're eating healthy fats, good carbs. Like we're not going and eating cereal, we're not going and just feasting on candy, like getting good quality nutrients into your body. And then as far as like your micronutrients or your supplements, so micronutrients are going to be anything that that's not like your protein, your fats. Those are going to be more of like your smaller items, right? So if I think a lot of times guys will probably have to use some sort of a supplement to get those into their nutrition because it's just kind of difficult to obtain that from like the average American diet. I recommend creatine for almost every athlete. I think it's kind of a cheat code. Like 5 grams of creatine can do a lot for a very undertrained individual. Getting onto like protein powders is a really easy fix to just, especially when you're going through practices or class and you just need that quick meal. Like protein powder drinks are really sufficient. And then a big one that I forget where I heard this from, but someone recommended it to me. Like if you're trying to gain weight, just start adding olive oil into everything because it's like 120 to 200 calories per tablespoon, and like that can really pack on some calories. Um, the one thing to be weary about like protein shakes is while they may be high in protein, like 30 grams of protein, like most of them are only going to have like 120 calories per serving. I saw a really good post about this the other day. I was just comparing like getting your protein sources from like an egg or like a meat versus just a protein powder. Like while the actual protein intake is going to be very similar, like if you eat 4 to 6 eggs, right, that's like 20 to 30 grams of protein. And you can probably get that in a scoop. But if you're having eggs, like you're probably going to have that with something. And so then the caloric intake is going to increase. So that way you're actually packing on like quality calories too, because calories are important to an extent because that's like your body's energy source. You know what I mean? So I guess to summarize all that, like there's really no need to like overcomplicate things. Unless you're like a very, very highly trained athlete, like those professionals, where like they need to really know what's probably going into their body at all times. But like for the general high school and college kid, like you're probably okay just making sure that you take into account, like, okay, I need to get this much protein, make sure I'm eating quality fats, like just your basic nutrition 101 class. So,
Okay. I mean, I had most of that noted, and I thought the one thing that I would kind of just build on is you said calories and protein
mhm.
as both as measurements. I feel like for a lot of athletes, the first level if you're trying is first of all get on the scale.
Yeah,
That if you're trying to measure that it doesn't you can track whatever you could whatever it needs to be. I get on the scale, I'm 150 today. I get on the scale, I'm 145. If I'm trying to gain weight, whatever I'm doing, I don't need any kind of a calorie tracker to do that. Once you kind of get past that point where you have your scale, you have your readings, Or you can also, in addition to the scale, your weight lifting readings that if you just can't get past 135 on the bench, you probably need to try and bulk up a little more. So once you do that, then maybe look at caloric uptake, caloric surplus. But then you get to that problem where if I expend 3,000 calories a day and I go to Taco Bell and I get my 3,000 calories that way, there might be a way that you can get more efficient outcomes where if you're getting a lot of carbs versus a lot of proteins, that's where that balance kind of comes in.
Unless you had a bad
So
day and you just need a Taco Bell Slump Buster, but
yeah, but the whole greasy bulk concept does work to the
yeah, if
extent
you're
that
really underweight. But like the one thing I will say about the scale, that's a great point. But just be cautious of like if you're gonna do the scale route, make sure that you're somewhat consistent with the window of time in which you weigh yourself.
yes.
Because a lot of times, like if I weigh myself in the morning, I don't weigh myself anymore. But like if I were, like sometimes I may be lighter in the morning, obviously, than you were at the end of the day. So like don't be like living and dying by the number of scale because it's going to fluctuate based on what you ate, even just water weight, right? Like if you're sleeping for 8 or 9 hours and you wake up the next day, like you're probably just going to lose a few pounds just from sleeping and not eating, right? So like just keep
Hmm.
that in mind when you're doing the scale route. But
Yeah. So and just to speak from a little of my experience, and the one question I have is you say all that and it's a very good plan. But what about you're in the middle of baseball season and say that you're responsible, unlike I was, and you wake up at 7:30 before a 9:30 bus, you make yourself eggs and bacon and sweet potatoes and have some avocados, and you get a really good 1,000 calorie, 1,500 calorie meal to supplement before that. Then you're going through the day and you might not eat for necessarily 7, 8 hours until your coach stops for
your $12 team
pizza on
budget
the way
dinner.
home. Right. So
Yeah, no,
if
I
I'm
get.
really
So
trying,
I
yeah,
think
if I'm,
that comes down to again putting the initiative on yourself because like that's where I get frustrated sometimes as a coach because like I'm just like highly motivated. So like I want them to see the progress. But if they're not going to actually put in the work themselves to like meal prep, do all these things, right? Like it doesn't have to be this complicated meal. Like, dude, like I'm telling you in college, like I just lived off of like ground beef and rice because
mhm.
like if you get an 80 to 20, 80 to 85-ish% fat, like that's going to be a good chunk of calories and then you pack that on with rice, like it's a boring meal, but like theoretically you could eat that breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Or if you don't want to go the ground beef route, like go chicken, you can eat that cold, and like you can just pack that in games, like make that in bulk in a crock pot, make that in bulk in your rice maker. Like there's really simple ways that you can do it where it doesn't have to be like this, especially as an athlete, like if you're trying to make luxurious meals for yourself every single night, like it's just not going to work. Like you have to keep it like very, very baseline, just like go bodybuilding old school style, like chicken and rice. Like even just like living out of the apartment here for the past week and like not trying to go crazy on groceries. Like I had chicken and rice for like 4 meals the other day.
Mhm.
It's just like simple. Like you can do that anytime. And like it's gonna be consistent on your protein. It's gonna be consistent. Like your rice is a great carb. And then like throw some butter in there for your fat and like you're good to go. So like
Yeah,
just
I think
simple.
I think that was my Franciscan diet was I'd pretty much I sometimes I'd eat breakfast, but I'd try and eat something on the way to class and then go to the dining hall at lunch, go to practice, go to the dining hall after lunch, maybe get another meal in there somewhere, and then come home. I had a thing of frozen chicken, I had a rice cooker, just whip it all up, put that down before I go to bed. And for me, the main thing was, and when I was at Obanzi, I struggled to lose weight or to gain weight a lot because I didn't realize like I would have a minimal breakfast, a minimal lunch, then I'd go home and have like 4 bowls of pasta or a huge thing of Chipotle and wonder why am I not gaining any weight? Well,
Yeah.
it's not that I'm not, even if I was getting to my calorie number or I was having a lot of protein or I was having big meals, one big meal is not gonna really tip you over the edge. It's not gonna get those gains.
Yeah,
What it
no, the
is,
best is all I've found the best is just 4 to 5. And it's like understand too, like in season, like it's just gonna be tough. Like the travel schedule is just so difficult. Like you're living off of like Holiday Inn breakfast, coach's $12 meal plan. Like
mhm.
it's not feasible, right? So like if you drop a couple pounds in season, like don't let it be the end of the world. But like I view like your nutrition in season, it's very similar like your weight training in season, right? Like if you built a solid base in the off season, like just try to consistently keep that schedule going into the in season. And like, yeah, you're gonna have to let that fluctuate a little bit. But like that's when those like kind of creative resources kind of come out. Like, okay, if I go to a gas station and I have $10 of cash on me, like how can I get the most with my $10? Like you can probably buy two Fairlife protein shakes. That's 80 grams of protein right there. Maybe just feast on a bag of $2 rice cakes from Aldi for your carbs. And that's a pretty solid snack for when you're traveling on the road. It's not perfect, but then when you
Mhm.
get home that night, like maybe just pack on an extra calories, hit a tub of ice cream. I don't know, something simple.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the research now is I've started to look into, and I know we've talked before about like a lot of the plant-based or a lot of just sort of the cleaner forms. Like I know veganism's become a popular trend. Again,
Nard,
at least in the pro circles. And I think there's some context to it, but realistically, I think what it has to come down to is if you're eating something that makes you feel physically bad or physically perform bad, and that could be too if you eat 1.5 times your amount of protein and you're realizing that it makes you feel slow and sluggish and maybe you're gaining weight but it's it's not good weight or something. That's where you can't just keep saying, oh well, I'm doing what I'm supposed to, I'm eating more than I'm burning off. So it's not an exact science, and
no.
at the end of the day it has to come down to I need to eat the things that I know are going to fuel me the most. And I think what I learned is there's a lot. I mean, that's why even to this day, I mean, sometimes Chipotle like 3 to 5 times a week is an option. But
Yeah.
realistically, I know what I'm gonna get when I eat there, and I know it's what I need. So why should I go out and try a vegan meal prep with all different beans and vegetables that I have no idea how it makes me feel the day before a game when I can just go and get the same Chipotle burrito that I know how to react to it. I know how it makes me feel,
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, bro. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I remember when Game Changers came out on Netflix, like
Hmm.
literally everyone and their mother was like, "Oh, you got to watch Game Changers. Like it's a game changer." It's like, no, it worked for those people. That doesn't mean it's gonna work for you. Like if you're fine just eating red meat all the time and rice, like eat red meat and rice all the time. Like if that works for you and it makes you feel good, like who cares?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we're not all vegan, and you
Yeah.
could go down a bunch of different rabbit holes for that. But the reality is, the animal protein seems to be at least the most dependable or the most cheap way to maintain a healthy diet. And
Like, dude, I don't eat like fruits and vegetables like barely ever. Like maybe once in a while I have a banana. I'll throw some berries in like a parfait. Really, the only vegetables I actually remember eating recently is just a salad, and like
Mhm.
I'm fine. But like your My Plate will tell you that you need to have half your serving of fruits and vegetables. But it goes back to that like if I'm a highly trained athlete that's working out 3 times a day, doing sports and everything like that, like is something I'm really craving in that moment, like some Brussels sprouts. Like, no, I'm going to be craving a nice piece of steak and some rice. Like, that's going to make me feel good. And like, again, your vegetables aren't high in calories. Yeah, they're an important part of your diet, but like, I'm still here. I don't really eat fruits and vegetables. So like, that's what works for me. I'm not saying that you have to go not eat fruits and vegetables, but like, I don't know. That's just what I've found has worked for me. So
Yeah, and I probably then I'm more into fruits and vegetables. Like I'd throw a lot of fruits in smoothies. I'm big into apples and bananas. I like the concept that that's nature's form of a sweet or a sugar, at least an apple is. So that's a really good thing mid-game. Instead of having uh, an added sugary Gatorade, all that, just eat an apple. Eat an apple. That'll replenish some of your natural sugars. That'll kind of give your body the minerals, the vitamins that it needs to function better. And it's the same thing. It's white with hydration. And I think it's a good rule of thumb too to try and work from the things that come from nature the most. Whereas like a huge processed bag of cookies compared to fruits that they might both have the same amount of sugar, but one of those sugar has been refined and distilled in a factory and pressed with all sorts of other things. One of them is just in its natural form.
mhm.
And I think that's a lot of the stuff too that as you're trying to be a healthy individual or healthy athlete, and maybe as we're looking at our lives now, or just kind of applying a lot of the athletic lessons that you do want to eat. There is a reason you want to eat cleaner, that there are healthy options and that we preach sort of moderation or temperance or not just having a whole thing of ice cream every day, that there are reasons that people are obese and people are in healthy weights.
Yeah, and I feel like having a solid nutrition plan, like it's going to kind of feed into those other points you mentioned at the beginning with your injury prevention and all that. Because like if you're morbidly obese, like it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that when you do a sport or something, you're just putting more pressure on your joints because there's
Yeah.
just more body weight, right? So like your injury prevention could very well just be eating better. Like that, it could be that simple.
Yeah. And I know that that's a concept that's come up a lot, is that a lot of times high intakes in red meat can lead to high inflammation, which might put pressure on your joints. And that's the example. If you're in a situation like that, you probably just need to balance out your diet a little more. Like
Mhm.
maybe find different sources of protein. That's why it's hard to argue for necessarily veganism or the carnivore diet, just because you're not diversifying your intake in any way.
Yeah, they're tough to be
So
sustainable.
yeah,
But I mean, again,
but
if those work for you, then they work for you. So I mean, it really just it boils down to the point. Like I think nutrition is just kind of individualized. Like you just got to kind of find what fits.
and the one clarifying thing, that when you say when it works for you, we're talking quantitatively.
Right.
Like it's not just what you enjoy.
Yeah.
Like if
Like
you
yeah,
are
you
trying,
might think freaking candy wrapper bags and like
yeah.
6 tubs of ice cream works for you, but like it ain't working.
Well, yeah, well, I'll put it this way. If that's your routine every game, I think isn't there a whole thing that Chipper Jones had like 3 hot dogs before every game and just went out and played?
Probably.
I mean, if you want to do that, you can, but chances are
You ain't chipper.
for most people to have that before a game, what's going to happen is you're just going to get injured. Or if you have one good game after that and you try and sustain it, you're going to you're going to run into issues. You're going to run into injury problems. You're going to run into energy problems. But if I'm trying to bulk up and I'm doing a $300 program from somebody that says you need to take this meal or this weight and what are they called? Like the mass gainers or
Oh
the
yeah.
protein powder, or you're doing all these things and you're go up 2 pounds in 6 months,
Yeah. I
even if
think
it
all
makes
those
you,
are just a scam, bro. Any of that like nutrition stuff, I just feel like it's a scam. Because it's like, dude, I feel like you can literally solve half your problems just by tracking your food and realizing like, oh, I'm not doing this.
yeah.
It's
And
free.
there,
Like my fitness pal's free. Like use that
yeah.
to your advantage. That's why like, I don't think I could ever be a nutritionist. I feel like I'd just be selling poison.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of the nutritionists talk has to do with research and what people find that, hey, we gave 100 of the highest level athletes these diets. This is how they react in the majority. So
Dude, okay, this is a complete side rant, but you know Bradley Martin? He's like a huge bodybuilder.
yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Okay, him and Mookie Betts did a collab, and Bradley Martin did Mookie Betts pregame workout. Bro, Mookie Betts' pregame workout was the most eye-watched thing I've ever seen. This was my lunch break today. I watched it on YouTube. His warm-up was like these hip opener step overs over the barbell. He was doing like little squats like under the barbell, like a hurdle. It's like, oh, I gotta make sure my hips are good, blah, blah, blah. And then he's doing band assisted jumps and do a full squat, getting like 30 feet above the bar. And then the best part was he's in Bradley Martin's gym at Zoo Culture, like this huge bodybuilding gym. The dude grabs a freaking wood bat and starts doing overcoming rotational isos into the bench. And then Bradley Martin's doing it. He's about to like snap the bat in half. And then they're doing like half rotational med ball scoop tosses. And that was his workout. And it's like Mookie Betts can get away with that because he's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. I think he's one of the greatest baseball players of all time. But like he's 170 pounds soaking wet and he hits nukes. Like that works for him. That does not work for the average individual. So it's like that same thing going back to nutrition. Like all these nutritionists might sell all these things because like they've done this with a professional athlete. It's like I hate that claim of like I should do this because this professional athlete does that, because it's like you're not a professional athlete. Like those are specimen of athletes. Just because they should be doing that does not mean that you should be doing that.
Yeah,
That's
I'm more or less agreeing. Just the one
you got to go
caution that
watch that YouTube. I'll send it to you after. It was
yeah.
a pretty crazy YouTube
But
video.
there is something to watching people who are jacked or are pro athletes or have something, and just because the thing is too is watching a video, you're never gonna get the full context because he could be doing that, but he could also be doing like a legit workout
He said he would
three to
train hard
five.
in the off season, but in season he's just worried
Yeah,
about like which like 100%. You play a 162 game, like you're not going to work out like a crazy person.
yeah.
Like
Which is
I've
why
even
it's
before, like most athletes that are at the like they're not going to be doing heavy deadlifts in season. Like it's just not worth the risk.
yeah.
So, but it
And
was
I
just
mean, yeah. No, I mean, do you have anything else on the injury prevention? I mean, no, I mean,
oh, I
the
got a
only
lot
note.
of regression. We haven't even gotten into that. I'm good on the nutrition. If you're good on the
All
nutrition,
right, well, this will be a natural time for a commercial. You can insert your commercial break, and we'll come back and restart the meeting.
uh,
We got to get a. We don't have a soundboard, but we got to get something that it's just like someone sipping a juice box. We need to get that as part of the pod. I had that thought earlier today.
Before we get back to the show here, I would like to take a moment to familiarize listeners with some of my other forms of social media. I am most active on Instagram. This is where I dive deeper into training philosophies, as well as some other content relative to my work. You can find me on Instagram at Grant_Lala. If you enjoy my style of training, you can go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel where I post exercise demonstrations daily. Through the link tree in my Instagram bio, you can find direct links to the Juiced Up podcast. As a reminder, we post new episodes every Monday on both Spotify and YouTube. I also post weekly blogs on my website. This is my form of longer content in addition to the podcast where I go a little bit more in depth about certain topics. If you enjoy the shorter form content, you can also find me on TikTok at Grant_Lala. With that, let's return back to the juice.
So you said you got a lot on injury prevention. Let's get into it.
so
So I'm going to give you a question first.
hold on. Save the
Okay.
question.
Okay.
I think with injury prevention is I think that injury prevention is almost like this topic that like should not even be considered for most people. It's almost like the topic of like deload weeks and like all these things because it's like if I say something about injury prevention, I think some athletes can hear that and think that they need to do that before they just train general qualities. And it's almost like that deload week thing where it's like I've said this many times where I don't think most individuals actually train their body and their nervous system hard enough to warrant like a whole week off of rest. Like most people are not training hard enough. They don't even live an active enough lifestyle to have to worry about that. And so the same thing with injury prevention. Like I think you can solve so many injury prevention problems by just getting on a really consistent, good strength regimen, like good training program. Like I think that's the best way to prevent injuries. Once you do that, I think we can get into more specific things like passive versus active mobility, why I think stretching is kind of eyewash for most people, like all those things. So what's your question?
Okay. Um, the main question that I had to do is I think the problem with a lot of the injury prevention logic is that people get very biased and they get very introspective. So they're very committed to their personal view. And that's why I use the massage gun too. Like if I use the massage gun for 20 minutes every day, and that's because I have back tightness or I have leg cramps or I'm trying to avoid maybe help with like a stretching thing, and I don't go on and have injuries. Therefore, I go telling people, oh, you're having your hamstring sore, you need to use the massage gun for 20 minutes a day. If you're so it's almost like as if that, and I think, I mean, you use stim, you use dry needling, cupping. There's all these random remedies to help sort of prevent like aid recovery, prevent soreness, and it really does kind of come down to, and I hate that it's kind of the conclusion of the discussion, but you have to see what gets you the best results, whether in the weight room or on in your physical output on the baseball or on the field.
See, I
But
would disagree with that.
you would disagree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because here's my thing, like, and I take this from like the FRC kind of functional range conditioning approach. Like the thing with all those modalities that you just mentioned, I feel like all of those are just feel good in the moment things. Like you're not actually doing anything internally for that actual issue. So if I have a quote unquote tight hamstring and I go and use a massage gun, of course it's going to feel good because I'm palpating that area. But like the reason my hamstring is tight is because I don't have the capacity to go past the certain ranges that is allowed. Like it all goes back to your nervous system. Like if I can only extend my leg this much without it being in pain, then like that's my end range for my leg. No sort of any of that stuff you mentioned is going to actually fix what's going on internally there. Right. So like
Yeah.
my thing with injury prevention is like if you have a legitimate issue, like you should always be looking at what's going on internally. And by internally, I mean like what's the structure around that particular joint? What's the structure around that particular area? Like, what are the ranges of motion that a healthy hamstring is supposed to be able to do? And if your hamstring can't do those things without it being quote unquote tight or quote unquote in pain, then it's like no matter how much you use those modalities, like you're just going to be kind of it's like that like the rabbit just running around in a circle. Like you're always going to be kind of chasing yourself. You know what I mean? So like yeah,
Okay.
it might work for you, but like I don't know. I don't think I've ever met a person that like had a hamstring issue and said it was just resolved by using a massage gun. Like if you
Mhm.
blow your hamstring out, like it's a painful injury and like it's a long road to get it back to recovery. Um, so like yeah, I think
Yeah.
I don't have anything wrong with any of those tools like massage guns or foam rolling or any of those stuff. Like I think it's a good routine to just kind of get in the habit of because yeah, there's stuff that shows that that stuff is important. But again, that shouldn't be your primary concern. Your primary concern should always go back to the fact of like how is this actually supposed to move?
Yeah. No, I thought you explained that really well with like, because any of the cupping, any of that stuff, it's all short-term fixes. It's not like your body's not doing anything. Like there is physically stuff that's whether it's to reduce inflammation or to help blood flow, like that is physically working. But at a certain point, whether it's 15 minutes after you're done, whether it's 2 hours, your body kind of resets. It's the same thing with the concept of icing or heating, that it doesn't last forever. So it
Mhm.
does kind of, at the end of the day, it comes down to the functionality of the movement or the joints around the movement.
That's why I love the
So
FRC stuff, right? Because like if you're working with an overhead athlete and you tell them to go through a basic shoulder car, meaning your controlled articular rotation, like your shoulder should be able to flex, it should be able to rotate, it should be able to adduct and adduct and extend. And if my shoulder can't do that, but then I'm going to go tell an athlete to go throw a baseball as hard as they can, and then they come back and say, "Coach, I'm injured." It's like, well, the reason you're injured is because maybe your shoulder can't flex over your head. There's your injury prevention. We should do things that work shoulder flexion. Or maybe you can't pronate properly when you're releasing a baseball. So maybe that athlete shouldn't be doing heavy overhead pressing. Maybe they shouldn't be loading a heavy bench press in that situation. But like you can still load the shoulder in a proper way. And I think this may go to your injury management point. I never really dealt with like quote unquote arm pain when I played, but I did have an issue. And I remember texting you when I was at the gym and I was benching. I was like, dude, I think I just like tore my pec. And that was like 6 months ago. And I knew that it was because like the areas in my shoulder and my rotator cuffs just were not strong enough to do the
mhm.
exercise that I was doing. So for like the next 4 months, all I was doing was just loading heavy, like not heavy, but manageable positions and internal rotation, external rotation, building the crap out of my posterior, my back, like all those things. And it's like that alleviated some of the issues in my rotator cuff when I was bench pressing. So like doing like I think a lot of times like people get into the strength and conditioning industry because they've had a situation like that happened to them and they want to like show people that you can kind of like recover from stuff. Like if you had that personal experience, right? So I think that's a huge thing is like if you've gone through that before, hopefully you can provide a little bit of insight. But like my issue is like when we have these people that say like this exercise is the best for this, it's like no, that's not the best for that. Like you need to actually look what's going on in that person and actually assess the athlete. And I'm not talking about like this crazy assessment, like just basic assessments where you can see what's going on with the individual, and then you can develop a plan for their best, treatments of care from there.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean the follow-up question is, I mean, like I used hamstring as an example because it's a pretty easy one to kind of just diagnose. Like you know if your hamstring feels sore or
mhm.
injured or something. But how does this apply to? And I think there's the MLB level and the pro ball level, and then the youth baseball, high school when you're still growing level. But why are there so many elbow and arm injuries? Because are we gonna sit here and say that every 14-year-old kid, before you even throw a baseball, you should be doing X, 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 and X so
No, but
that
I
you
think
can
that's
throw
also
this.
partially the issue too. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah,
Okay.
obviously that's not feasible. You can't tell every kid that you can't throw a baseball until this happens. But it's like we see arm injuries are at an all-time high now because you have 13-year-olds that can throw 80 plus miles an hour. You got people in high school that are topping out at 95 as a freshman. Like the human body is not like supposed to be able to withstand that amount of load. And so like just getting into like a consistent strength training program is something that I don't think is pressed upon enough at the youth level. It's like we choose games, pushing games down kids' throats before we actually like just put the development in their hand. And it partially just comes down to like keeping up with the Joneses. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it is the parents because it's like they want the best for their kid and they think the best route for them is playing 60 games a year. But it's like maybe that's not the best route for a 12-year-old that's not developed, right? Like maybe we should just train general qualities first, see how that helps their body. I'm not saying that if you do that, arm injuries are going to decrease, but I think it could only help. Like, why should a 14-year-old be throwing weighted baseballs? Like, actually, like
Yeah,
throwing
I
a
don't have a good answer for
baseball,
that. No,
throwing a baseball is already
that's heavy enough.
it's heavy enough for a what do 14-year-olds weigh? 120 pounds. Like, and then you're throwing that at a max intensity. Like that's plenty. But like we push weighted baseballs for velocity, but we don't push a weight room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. The only, I mean, the flaw to that mindset is that actually it's not really a flaw to that mindset, it's just another flaw in general. But why are MLB players who have done all of that necessarily, or they've trained, why are there still so many arm injuries? Because it's like it's almost the question, like, is there any training program that can get you to safely throw
No,
95, 100
there's
miles
not
an
because
hour?
again, it's something that I think throwing that hard is something that the human body will I don't think ever will be capable of. And it's like it
Okay.
does beg the question, like, do MLB players have the best training? I mean, I watched Mookie Betts. Like, I think there's a lot of things he could be doing better. But are you going to tell Mookie Betts that he should go switch his training program when he's hitting 330 and is a starting shortstop for the Dodgers? No, you're not. You're going to try everything in your power to keep him healthy on the field. But like, it kind of goes back to your point of like, if he eats a burrito before every single game and that works, it's working for him. Like, why are we going to switch something? You know what I mean? So it's a tricky line because it's like I don't think that a lot of professional athletes actually train. I don't think they need to train because they're just really skilled people. And so like if we use that as our example of what training should be, like youth athletes will never catch up to the curve.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd love to revisit this conversation another time too. Like, and with maybe if you work with more pro athletes, you see
Yeah.
just as we kind of see more of the routines and what goes into it, just because we're judging a lot of this based on small
Yeah,
sample
I've never
size of
worked with
what
a
we
pro
see.
athlete, but I mean, I know
Yeah.
in your role they have a lot of pro guys that train there, so it'll be interesting because like I don't think I don't think I know for a fact I would not be doing what I'm doing right now with pro athletes because I
Right.
don't think it's just like it's like that risk reward ratio. I just don't think a lot of the stuff
It's a
that
different stage of development too,
yeah
where you're
it
not
is. It's
trying to
like
get them to the pro level, you're trying to get them. But that's the thing too, whereas like once you get to a certain level, you don't need to get better, you just need to get healthier.
right.
Because most major or most minor league college highball careers are just going to get delayed or derailed because injuries pile up. That if you're a double A pitcher that's 27 and you have to get Tommy John, your chances of going to the major leagues just decreased by so much because you got to not only be under contract for 18 more months,
Hmm.
but you have to get back to the level you were at and stay healthy again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, dude, I don't
that's
envy
where
shooting conditioning coaches at the pro level because it's like, what do you do? Like, or even like pitching coaches at the pro level. It's like you got a guy that throws this hard. Like, what are you really even doing? You know what I mean?
and it begs the question too of like I know we talk a lot with football how it's like if you're playing football, there's no healthy way to do it. So you're basically banking on the fact that I'm gonna ram my head into everybody and try and get a lot of money and then retire at 35 and whatever brain damage that I've done, I've created a sort of wealth stream.
Hmm.
And it would be a shame that you look at all of the pros and cons with baseball that it's not a real high contact sport. It's not super taxing on the body, except really for the arm injuries, just with this insane concept of just doing this day after day at max force.
And I think
But
the only way, and it's never going to happen, but the only way you can fix that is if you it's got to be the travel baseball world, man. Because, like, you look at these kids in Illinois, for example, you're playing, if you're a pitcher, you're throwing 1 to 2 times a week at 180 pitches. Let's say you're a starter, right? Like, you get that 90 pitches on Monday, you can come back the following, maybe even Saturday. I don't know what the pitch limit, maybe you're limited to like 50. But then you do that, maybe you're throwing 30 to 40 innings in the high school season. But like in Illinois, unless you're a draft pick, no one's coming to high school games. So then you have to go play travel baseball to get your exposure. And then you're throwing, I mean, I feel like travel baseball does even a worse job than the high school level of actually managing pitch counts, because it's like a lot of those coaches don't know what they're doing. And so then you're playing a full another 40 game season. And then you go in the off season and you're pressing for velo. So you're doing weighted balls, you're throwing more, like all these things. And like, I don't necessarily think those things are wrong, because I understand that you have to do that to try to get to the next level. But it's just like the game's just coming way more competitive at such a young age. Like it's only going to get kind of worse, in my opinion. I don't know if you.
yeah, no, I mean, if you look at it as a multiple choice question, is the answer throw as many pitches when you're younger, when you're playing, because that builds up arm strength, it builds up sort of the tolerance, it gets you better at the skill. So that way, if you want to go throw 130 pitches, if that's the Japanese method,
Mhm.
that if you've thrown 200 pitches every day, you can throw 200 pitches every day and be healthy. You can go the opposite. Like, look at what the Pirates are doing with
Yeah, but you look at,
Scenes now, and
do a lot
it's
of those Japanese pitchers, with the exception of Shohei, like do they throw like gas? I feel like most of them are just crafty pitchers. Like,
that we'd have to look at the sample size a little bit more. But I mean, it's
well,
not
I'm
like
just
they're
basing off
throwing
like the guy that
85.
Cubs just signed. Like he's maybe throwing 90 to 192, like, which is still
Mhm.
hard, but like it's not like you're like triple digits. You know what I mean?
Right, but like if it's, and essentially if that's working, is that sort of the middle ground for where you need to be as the pitcher though? It's like it's just you have all these questions and you have all these different minds. Like there are some people that there is the travel world where they don't care about, they'll throw whoever, but there's also the travel world where they won't throw a kid more than 75 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
They, or in minor league ball, if you're focusing so much on managing someone's load, you wonder then at a certain point, do you baby them too much? And
Yeah,
that's where I
because it
ask
is
about
almost that
sort of
point too. It's
injury.
like, do some high schoolers even throw hard enough to worry about arm pain? Like I've told that to some of my guys, like you throw 80 miles an hour. Like I don't think that's a lot of wear and tear on the arm. Does it matter how much you throw per week, really? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I'll just say this is that my senior year of college, my shoulder was killing me, and I don't even throw 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
So
repetitive motion
that's
for sure.
that's the question, is like, what was I doing wrong, or what could I have been doing better? Because I'm not going to sit here and just saying, oh, it's because I throw a baseball 70 miles an hour, that's why my arms hurt.
No, it's
It's
not.
obviously a combination of things. It could be built up inflammation. It could be not getting it. That's why I mention all the modalities and stretching, because sometimes if you don't give enough like attention to the function of the muscles, that's where certain limitations come in.
Hmm.
So it's like, that's what I'm saying. Like it's a different look if you're throwing 98 and your elbow hurts versus if you're throwing 72 and your elbow hurts, because clearly one of them you're putting more stress on it with the action. So you can look and say, well, maybe you shouldn't throw, maybe you should throw less, or maybe you shouldn't throw harder, or we should manage more of that.
Yeah, and I mean, I
Because
think like with the managing injuries, and like let's say you do have arm issues, regardless of if you throw 70 or 90, like
mhm.
I don't want to like talk badly about PTs too much, because I think there are some really good PTs out there. But like even just kind of getting a little bit of a taste of it, like some of those stuff that were prescribed to do by doctors is like it's making the individual worse. So it's like you come in and you're supposed to come in hoping to restore your arm, but it's like in order to do that, like you got to actually stress that arm pretty good to get it back to a place where it can be 100%. And it's like we're doing air dyne bike for 10 minutes and band pull aparts and for 3 sets of 10. maybe some wall presses, and like that's your PT session. So it's like, how are you ever going to get back to getting your arm to be able to withstand, which we've talked about, a very not human thing of throwing baseball. So, I mean, I think we can talk about the travel ball industry. We can talk about not, keeping an eye on pitch counts, but I do think like this profession of strength and conditioning and PTs, like we're also not doing a great job either too. Like if there is that many injuries, like what's to say about the return to play kind of protocols that we've put in place? Like even just some guys that get hurt in high school, like you send them to the training room, it's like, what'd you do in there? I just did some banded clam walks and I iced for 40 minutes. Well, like that's not,
and they taped it. They taped it and they
yeah,
iced
they
it.
use KT tape. Like that's not doing anything. Like you think you're going to be able to play next week with a torn hamstring because you iced it for 40 minutes and you did your elevation and you did a little bit of your Normatec compression sleeves. Like that's what you went to school for 8 years, is to tell an athlete to do that. Like, I mean, that's not doing anything either. So
Did you follow the whole Aaron Rodgers injury
I have not.
history thing?
Mhm.
And where the reason I asked the question, and then I won't talk about it too much without the context, but he tore his Achilles, like full on Achilles
Yeah,
tear, which traditionally that's what, like a 12 to 18th month recovery period.
if that, yeah.
His whole thing is he tore it week 1 of the series. He said he'll be back by the playoffs. And he showed like there was stuff of him throwing around a football and like kind of walking gingerly on a boot. And I think part of what he did, his training, is he's got like alternative training methods with his doctors, stuff that's too cutting edge or too high access that we don't have, but it's
Mhm.
also non-traditional medicine. But it's kind of in the sense like you have to retrain, because that's essentially what rehab is, right? Is if you get a injury repaired, you have to get it back to the point where it can deal with the natural amount of stress and it can function the way that it was. Where that's where a lot of athletes will say that after a torn ACL surgery, it's not necessarily like that the knee hurts. It's more of just getting over like the fear
Fear.
that it's going to tear again,
Well,
or
see,
that
that's a
any.
huge thing. Is like I think the reason, like and I'm not a licensed PT, but the way I was at my job, like you didn't have to be. But like I realized very quickly I could never do that profession because I just had a terrible way of empathizing with pain. Like, and that's like a huge part of PT. Like someone's saying like, this hurts. It's like, okay, well, does it really hurt? Like, does it really hurt you? And like I think when you bring up that Aaron Rodgers example, it's like that dude's a competitor at all costs. Like if a general person tears their Achilles, they're probably going to take 2 years to recover, and it probably will never recover properly because they just don't have the motivation to actually recover it properly, or like they're just too worried about like pushing through those pain tolerances. But then you got Aaron Rodgers, like he just wants to ball out on the field. Like he's going to do everything in his power to come back. So it really is just, I think a lot of times, and I'm glad you brought that up because I
Well,
think,
remember he didn't come back though. That's the only reason why. Like he said he was going to do all of this, but once the Jets were eliminated, he was like, "All right, I'm not going to come back."
well, yeah, but like I
So
think
that's the only way of saying. So it's not necessarily like the technology and the science is there
it's
where you
mental
can, but a lot of it seems like it is. And
because like
I want you to finish your thought, but I mean, I think that the main question kind of to keep in mind is just like you mentioned pain empathy. So it's like, so just where do we go for that? So
I haven't had any crazy injuries. Like I tore my plantar fascia, which I guess is like crazy because like you're not supposed to be able to walk. But like I was able to recover that fairly quickly. I had that little shoulder thing, but like I think with me, it's like if I get an injury, I'm doing everything in my power to come back as quick as I can. Whether that means like my rehab is sucking and like it hurts, like I know I'm just gonna grind through it. But like if I don't know how I can get someone to do that themselves. Like they have to have that intrinsic motivation as well. Because like if they're doing an exercise and they're like, this hurts, I can't do it. Like my immediate thought is like, no, it doesn't hurt, you're soft. But like for them, it probably really does hurt them. Like I just learned very quickly, like the rehab part of it is just something it's difficult for me because it's like that pain empathy is just not there. And like I think a really good PT has to have that fine balance of like having empathy, but then also being like, yeah, I know this hurts, but like we need to do this in order to get that range of motion back. So it's like, yeah, it's difficult because like I think a lot of times injury prevention or injury rehabilitation is like more mental than not. Because like you're retraining some part of your body how to do something. Like that's extremely mental, you know?
Mhm. And I think that this is kind of where we get into like the flaws of maybe the medicine. I mean, because that's kind of where I'll go off my soapbox and kind of rant on just some of the stuff that's come up the last years is how we'll like trust if somebody's a doctor and they say something, or the CDC says something, or some guy some guy in a suit that has a doctor or an MD with his name says something, that we just need to listen to him and say that this is what's best for you. That at the end of the day, everyone is limited in their knowledge of how to treat injuries, of how to treat patients, which is why if you get if you get a clinician and whatever, whether it's a physical therapist, whether it's a doctor or a chiropractor or somebody who is looking at the whole situation and saying, okay, your problem is if you have an elbow surgery, you need to do this, this, and this. These are the hurdles you're going to go vex. This is everything that we can do to help. Because most people are just going to say, oh, you tore your elbow, we need to have surgery to fix it.
Mhm.
Oh, why do you have to fix it? I don't know, go talk to a physical therapist. You
Yeah.
go talk to a physical therapist, they tell you one thing. You go, because I mean, how many second opinions and third opinions? Because there's never going to be concurrence in the industry. So if you have an injury, it is up to you to provide that sort of motivation to figure out what is the best for you. And that's a tough thing to not go crazy about and say, like, because you're thinking, I got my plantar fascia torn. You're going to be worrying every step that if you do one exercise, it could make something, you do one thing that could completely make it like, so you can't even walk anymore.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and I think it's just like, unfortunately, it's just the world we live in too. Like we love quick fixes, and so like I think our healthcare system sometimes adopts that mentality. Um, but yeah, dude, I think the biggest red flag would be like if you're doing anything in life, like whether that's injury prevention, like rehabilitation, or like a strength and conditioning program, like the moment that person says like you need me for this is like that's when you need to run away. Because it's like there's nothing that I can tell the person to do if they don't want to do it themselves. Like it's just not going to work for them. Like that's I feel like one of the biggest red flags. And I think that's unfortunately more often than not with like a lot of that rehabilitation doctors and stuff like that. It's like this idea of like you need to come in 3 times a week for 3 hours and you'll be perfect for
yep,
4 weeks. And it's like
you go to the chiropractor, they go, you're all fixed. And then when
I
you're
don't
not
want
fixed, you
to.
come back and you keep giving them their income
Yeah, and
stream.
it's like okay, again, it's like sure if it works for you, it works for you, but it's like what are you gonna do like if you can't go in that day? Like are you just gonna be in pain that day? Like what why can't you figure something out that works for you? Like even when I was doing that PT stuff there, like I always wanted my patients to have a plan,
Yeah.
like where they could go. Like I only just use that more of just like an assessment to see how we are doing, and maybe we try some new stuff out there. But like I wanted them to have a general plan, and I tell them straight, I'm like, look, like you coming in here 3 days a week for 40 minutes, like that's not going to fix you. Like you
Yeah.
need to consistently take this upon yourself to like set timers throughout the day, even if it's only like 12 to 15 minutes of just moving your body, like doing things like that. I was like, that's how you see long-term results, you know? And like I've never had that philosophy until I really started the FRC stuff because I was not a flexible individual at all. And I still don't think I'm like crazy flexible, but like I could never touch my toes, and like now I can do that stuff with ease. Like I've
Mhm.
had some crazy moments where I was like doing stuff with heavy weight where like I thought for sure I was going to crack my back or tear my hamstring, but like I think when you just start to train your body to not be super fragile, and there's obviously right and wrong ways to do that. Like you don't have to just go load a 315-pound Jefferson curl, but like and to like do things where you progressively overload your body, like that's always going to be the best injury prevention. And then sure, like use your modalities as a side, but yeah, man, like I don't know. I think what regardless of like what the science says it has to say about like the cracky backy chiropractic care, like I think it's just a mindset of just like the fact that you need that person to do something for you is something that I don't think I can ever get on board with. And that's why we need to have Dr. Kyle on because he's a sick chiropractor that actually does things the right way.
Well, and I mean, that's the question with all of this is like, I'm looking at something on the internet. So like, I'm trying to figure out, is somebody a good person? Do they know what they're doing? Because again, my bench line is very similar. It's like when I'm in the doctor's office, when I'm somewhere, as I'm asking you, what can I do so I never have to see you again for
Facts.
this
That's how it should
injury?
be. Yeah.
And then over time, you, if I have shoulder pain and I go somewhere and I'm getting that treated and everything, that I want to go so I can figure out my shoulder pain. Then maybe if what I was in a position where it's okay. I was able to help you get to a point where you were able to self-sufficiently take care of this. Then if I have another injury, that's how then I go back because I trusted that but it shouldn't be you're just doing the same thing. All my back, whenever my back locks up, I just go get an adjustment. No, it's you should be getting the tools to, and that's where I'm just repeating what you said, but it's
Yeah.
you should be getting the tools to be able to take care of yourself.
Well,
And
and
what
like,
did
I like
go ahead.
go too much on this, but like I remember patients like explicitly saying like, and they've been here for like 2 months now, and I'll be like, "How you doing? Like, how are you progressing?" And like, I feel the same. It's like, well, we've been here for 2 months, and it's like, and the doctor's responses were just like, well, based on this, like they should be there. I'm like, well, they're not there. So like, based on your science, it's wrong. So like, now what are you going to do? And I think it kind of goes back, like we can go on a whole tangent about like education and all that stuff too. But like, it's like if you don't ever step out of that box of like what your educational system's teaching you or what a scientific study's teaching you, because it's like it's when you're working with individuals or you're working with real human beings, like there's gonna be issues where like you can't plan for that. So like now how do you adapt, right? And I think that's just a big flaw with a lot of things in professions is just like there's no outside of the box thinking. It's like it should work this way. If it doesn't work this way, I can't help you. I don't know, you know?
So I have one other follow question that I want to get your question about,
Sure.
or get
We're
your
running out
answer
of
about.
time here. So
We're
we
not
should
running out
wrap
of
this
time.
up.
We're fine. We got 10 minutes. 10 minutes is
Who
a long
wants to
time for
listen to
us.
a 3 hour podcast about us rant about Kairos?
Well, apparently 3 people do on the subs list. So if our previous content hasn't gotten engagement, I don't know what is.
I
Maybe we
don't
need
know
Grant to
what.
start
If you've listened
dancing
this
everybody
far,
into
like I
this.
don't know what else we can do. So
Yeah. But so what about all just the internet doctors? Like you're going on and you see chiropractic so and so or trainer so and so on YouTube, on Instagram. And like the same thing that they could essentially they're seeing you and they could be just thinking like, well, you're just saying you need to do this, this, and this.
but see, the thing is, I don't say that, and I think that was my last podcast, right? Like I don't think I think the problem with a lot of this like social media influencer stuff is like the moment you're telling someone how to live their life is when the issue comes. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with just sharing what you want to share and like posting all these things, like help putting out guidance and resources for people. But the moment we kind of like start labeling things as best and you need to do this, this will fix that. It's like, well, how do you know? You've never seen that person. You've never worked with them. You've never assessed them. You've never seen how they move. Like, I think that's where the issue is. And so like, yeah, I think that's probably, I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on it and my opinion that I had kind of going into this was if you're going to trust anybody on social media, have it be someone that you trust from having a one-on-one relationship working
Yeah.
with them before
Yeah.
just looking at their videos and saying, "Oh, I really like them." Because anyone can make a YouTube video. Not anyone can make friends and make clients.
Anyone can start a podcast or
Right.
living proof of that.
Yeah.
No, but like
And
that's a very good point. And I think that's kind of what the point I was trying to portray in my last episode. Go listen to it if you haven't. About like just being authentic. Because I think your primary focus on your building a good social media should just be kind of showing who you are as a person. Because I think people gravitate towards that. I think they gravitate towards like, hey, this is a real person. This is a person that deals with some struggle. This is a person that's like not a genetic freak. Like, oh, okay, maybe I can start to feel a little bit more comfortable with what he's trying to say. Like I think once you build that rapport, or build that relationship with like people that are following you, they're going to be more inclined to hear what you have to say, rather than just like a jack dude being like, "Here's 3 exercises to blow up your bicep." Well, like yeah, he's jacked, but like we don't know anything about that guy. So
and that's just where I reiterate maybe it's friendly advice, maybe it's my disclaimer to all my friends I know that are listening to just not. But at the end of the day, it's like make sure that when you're seeing somebody, like anyone can make anything look good to try and get more, because now it's just to get engagement. So you want to get 10,000 views, but you
mhm,
can't have 10,000 people that you can just talk to and give the time of day to. Because that's
yeah,
what's frustrated me is a lot of times I'll ask certain people questions that they won't necessarily respond, but it's like, so you care about everybody when you're on camera, when you're not, you don't care about the people that are going deep enough to go and look at it. So that's just to make sure that it's always healthcare injuries, doctors, it's all a personal relationship. So make sure that if you're going to invest in that and you're going to go get clinical help or you're going to be focused on stuff, make sure that you know the person and that you build that sort of trust where you know that they're invested in you. Because no one's going to be invested in myself more than me.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that you're as invested in me, at least to the level that I know that you care about me.
Let's end this with some positivity. Let's give a couple shout outs of like good people to follow on social media. I'll give a couple.
I don't know about that. I'm shout out Heidi Throws for his complete game against LaRoche. Tougher outing against Grove City, but first, I mean,
There we go.
12 months ago, he was a collegiate, he was a bullpen catcher. Now he's throwing a CG. So
Sick transition.
hopefully it was a little bit of an ego tamper, getting a few barrels off of Grove City, but positive framework. You got anything else?
Yeah, for like the injury prevention stuff, I would highly recommend Dak Performance and Health. Like I think that guy's killing it with the industry as far as like how to actually do injury prevention stuff. What we got? Yeah, some ISOs, but like for real, like that, like
that's Dak.
that's actually how you should, do some stuff there. So like if you didn't resonate with any of our rants there, I think that's a great resource. And then obviously Dr. Kyle, we need to get him on the podcast, but like he's a chiro that I believe is doing it very well.
Well, we can ask a lot of these questions towards him, I'm sure.
Yeah, dude, I would be very curious.
Yeah, so
because I think he'd probably give well more thought out answers than I did there. But
yeah. Any shout outs you saw, anything in the baseball world that else you saw?
No, not really. I'm gonna be in the SEC tournament, hopefully.
What?
SEC tournament?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. There's gonna be 12 teams that can win it.
Yeah, you got to come down.
I don't know.
Podcast at the
I think that's like the one busy week. At some point, it's on my bucket list. I want to go. That's a cool event, but I am trying to put out some I'm not giving any social media shout outs because I'm not active on social media, but I'm trying to put out something for college baseball, trying to get some of the similar brackets. So stay tuned. Need a little more work on my end, but I want to start putting.
I think Mississippi State might be the sleeper in the SEC and Alabama, but I feel like Alabama will probably get a regional.
Well, Bama is going to have to win every game 15-14. So
yeah, I mean they can slug it, but
yeah. But
all right, well that's all I got. You got anything else?
Yeah. No, good talk.
All right, stay juicy.